Got one for Jay.
Still waiting for the charter. Still haven't had a meeting for the charter.
That's what, that is what the board, that is what the board asked for.
And the charter. Because all these states,
Going to get it, but I'm already doing it.
he said after
They may not all be wrong, y'all can make. Some of them may not be your satisfaction, that don't mean they may not be wrong. Jeff, we will never satisfy you. It's been quite a year. It's only been 6 months. I'm saying 30, and then I'm adding 30 for you. I'm giving 15 for you to go over it, and 15 for y'all to talk about, and then another 30 for you to talk about.
This is your joint, ain't it? Yeah, this is. Yes. Okay. That's the one you would.
But Debbie, she's the one who did the labor. I'm funding it, she did the labor.
Could he build Rossville since he's talked to her?
Yeah.
You build Rossville since you talked to her. Bill her for this meeting.
I don't, they're pretty good about paying just like y'all are. Okay. $100,000, right? That's a good deal. Yeah, thank you.
So plug it in, if I've got myself, right on the other side.
What does she need a sound system?
Yeah, it's got a little cord, but I'm working on it.
Turn your mic on. Turn it on. Let's see if it's working.
She's talking about the traffic.
I don't like talking. Look at her. She's trying to take over everything. Need to go out there and sit down somewhere.
Mayor, Tom had to go back out and get his glasses in the car.
What? Did? I thought it got
Mr. Duncan. How you doing?
All right.
You get that delivered?
Oh, yes.
You find that on your porch?
Yeah. And thank you kindly.
You was here when I was questioning about the Christmas stuff. What would have mentioned
Soon
then?
as you noticed the missus called me and says
They can't
somebody
say
was
it.
in a van.
The one that's on there, because I got a different one. I ain't even gonna look at the one she gave me.
Oh,
White
state
van.
Oh, okay. I need to know a van.
Yes.
Does your wife work for the state?
No, the daughter do.
Oh, okay.
We all here. What we waiting on? Time mine.
Stroke of 6.
It ain't 7, 6 yet. Likes 2 minutes. Just likes 2 minutes.
No, I've got it. It's being written.
Council?
God bless us.
You wear glasses? You know, if you turn them inside out, they work better.
Today, and I'm sure they was in session because they was up there. It's probably calling me tonight. Not on the phone. Left it on charge. Forgot it, but I don't need a phone here anyway.
Go sit down. But what if everybody knows we did that? They don't slam.
Jeff Bright, they hired him as a CEO. Well, I found his stuff, and I found some people that know him. And so, not him, I've got some good friends that know some of the chip. Right, exactly, that's why he's going over.
You know dang well.
That, $175,000 a year.
I'd go for that. And say, yes, sir, Mr. Governor, just tell me what you want me to say.
Yeah, $175,000 a year. I don't know what the Commissioner of Department of Transportation pays.
Mr. Minor, you got it cleared where you can see good now? Okay. No, no problem. It's not time to start yet. Got about, yeah, it is now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you that we start our meetings out with a pledge and a prayer. So I'll ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Cates.
Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. Just thank you for the opportunity we have to come together to discuss and problems and work out things in our town. Father, I come to you right now. I pray that you will be with little Zadie in the morning as she goes through this surgery for cancer. She's only a month old. Just comfort their family, their mom and dad in a mighty way. Just put your hand on our town. Bless us. Keep us safe. I pray and ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Ms. Vaughn, I think we can establish that we have a quorum. All members are present. Need approval of the agenda. I believe we have some additions and deletions on there. Mr. J, you got something you want to add?
I have two deletions. I'd like to ask item 6 and item 12 be deleted from the agenda. And I would ask on item 13, I would ask that we keep it on the agenda, but I have a substitute proposal for that.
Okay. I would like to add a 14 tonight, gentlemen, for your benefit. We've had some discussions about our debt bond ratio and some things of that nature. I have asked Mr. J to talk a little bit with us tonight about our debt summary and where the town of Oakland is, so I would like to add that as item 14, if it's all right with you.
If I could speak, I don't have any objections to additions or deletions, but our charter determines what we can and can't do at a special call meeting. And it don't say anything about deletions. It just says only the business stated in the written call or stated at the meeting when the special meeting is called may be transacted at a special call meeting, at a special meeting.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. And so I don't mind talking about that. I feel like we will move into an executive session after this meeting anyway. And so, I say we leave everything as is on the agenda, and we can work it from there if there's nothing to talk about. But with that being said, in our charter, I just hate to fool with the agenda.
Okay? So what is the board's wishes here?
Would you consider pulling yours off number 4?
I will certainly pull it off.
I make a motion to leave the agenda as originally copied.
I'll second that.
I have a motion from Mr. Cates, have a second from Vice Mayor Sutton. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. First thing is I'll take a motion for consideration of Resolution 21-114, authorizing subdivision development agreement with the Welch Family, LLC, developer of Wellington Place.
Make a motion to hear.
Have a motion from Mr. Cates. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from Mr. Sutton. Mr. Minor, you wanna talk about this, please, sir?
Well, as the board is probably aware, back in May, there was an approval of the Wellington Place subdivision development agreement that was, identical to the development agreements that had been approved by the board over the last at least 18 months. When this development agreement was submitted to, Mr. Welch and to, his attorney, they requested, some revisions. Mr. Johnson and I met with, Mr. Welch and Mr. Poe, I think 2 weeks ago, and went over those things. There was some negotiation. What has resulted from those negotiations are some what I would consider to be, minor revisions that, address, legal language dealing with what constitutes, a reasonable notice. We've added words like commercially reasonable, but the 100% build out requirement is still there. And then similar to what we did with, Grant Homes over on Twin Oaks, there has been an agreement, that the, developer can petition or request of the town that once the final plat is recorded and all that's left is just a warranty on the streets, that the bond be reduced. So I would recommend its approval.
Okay. What is the wishes of the board? Any other questions?
Is this something that we're getting in a habit to do, or is this something that was necessary to change,
On what, Mr. Cage?
this contract?
The changes that were requested are for instance, where notice was to be provided, paragraph 1.5 is an example. Inspection approval by the town's engineer. Town through its engineer has the right to review and require commercially reasonable changes. That word commercially reasonable changes has been added. That's a legal term of art. I have absolutely no problem with that because
Okay.
courts would apply that standard anyway.
Okay.
And I would also add that Mr. King has reviewed these changes and Mr. Johnson as well, but he has sent the revisions over to Mr. Poe and Mr. Welch for their review. And Mr. Poe has now responded in an email to me saying that they are in agreement with the revisions that we're proposing.
Mr. Jack?
To respond further to Mr. Cates's question, I would anticipate any future agreements with any developer will include the wording from this contract as well.
So it should have been in there all the time, right?
I think it's a lot of, you modify things with experience.
And again, this is their lawyer, and that's what lawyers do. They're pushing back a little bit, wanting more clear definitions of what notice is, and so we've tried to comply with that. I don't think that it is any way a situation that doesn't do anything other than make the parties feel more comfortable with what notice requirements are.
No, I don't have any objections to what you agree to. I was just curious about that.
Need a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept resolution 2114.
Have a motion for Mr. Case. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second for Mr. Hahn. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. We've taken 6 off. Moving down to number 7. Review and discussion of Fayette County Clerk's office, Oakland location.
I
didn't
thought
know
we left,
We voted not to take anything off.
not to remove or add.
Okay. Have a motion to consider resolution 21, whatever, authorizing engineering agreement with King Engineering for Welch Place.
So moved.
Have a motion to consider. Have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me, may I speak on this? Resolution 2134 had been previously approved.
We run development contracts and engineering agreements generally simultaneously on the same agenda. As Mr. Minor said, the original contract with Wellington Place was on a May agenda, as was the engineering inspection agreement with King Engineering. Because the development agreement was coming back, I had made a note to put the engineering agreement on here as well. There was no changes to the contract which involves the engineering agreement, so no action is necessary by the board. We have in place an agreement for engineering inspection.
With that said, stand as, on file, 21XX,
34.
2134.
I have to agree with you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. King, was he invited to this meeting?
Yes, sir, he was.
He had prior engagements, or?
He indicated to me that he was going to use his best efforts to attend. And I did tell him the meeting was at 6 o'clock.
Was that a motion, Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
I second it.
Have a motion by Mr. Duncan, have a second by Vice Mayor Sutton. All in favor? Okay, moving to number 7. Review and discussion of Fayette County Clerk's Office, Oakland location. Have an update here from Mr. J.
About 45 days ago or so, I received an email from Shanna Birch, the Fayette County Clerk. As the board is aware, the town provides the county clerk office space in the house across the street. It generally has been staffed 2 days a week. As you're all aware, with COVID, there was a period of time where it was not staffed at all. For the last month or so, it has been staffed 1 day a week. And in her email to me, she indicated that was the plans going forward. I indicated to her that I thought that was a question, that a lot of people use that as convenient for our citizens, and we need to see it staffed more. Second, as you're all aware, we're on top of each other in our buildings, and to have that big a room sitting empty 4 days a week is not a good use of our limited office space. I will share with you, and I don't know where this stands now, but about a month ago, she and I talked. A lot of counties are going to kiosk in their courthouse, their satellite courthouses, where you could plug in a kiosk with an internet connection. The county clerk can, and then citizens can use that for some renewals and some things. And she indicated they were looking at that, and I indicated that we could certainly provide a location for something like that here. My question to you is very simple. Do we accept 1 day a week? Do you would like the mayor and I to meet with her and see if we can't get more time here, or is this something we just don't address?
I mean, I certainly appreciate them coming to Oakland and offering that service where I don't have to drive to Somerville to get my tags. And I think most of the citizens do, the way it looked over there Tuesday. Wednesday, we have a parking problem anyway, every other Wednesday because of court. And so it's, I mean, I've seen it where couldn't nobody pull in over there to get a tag if they wanted to, and that's what caused people parking at the other business across the street, which they complained about us parking over there. So, I mean, I think that they're actually doing us a service by coming to Oakland. If it's 1 day a week or 2 days now, we want to talk about space. You know, I don't know. Could they operate with more? That may be what y'all need to meet. I mean, how much space do they need to operate? But I'm all for them being here. If it's 1 day a week, if that's what they can do, I still like that they come 1 day a week for us.
Could we not partition that big room off and let them just use part and us take the rest of it?
The way that building's laid out, I don't know that that would work. To the vice mayor's point, the way the building's laid out, and that is the first office off the entrance, if you will, it flows pretty well. There's an advantage to that. I'm doing this from memory, but the back half of that office actually ties into the storage room off the old garage. I'm not sure that would be a good office space. It might be storage, but it probably couldn't be an office.
It's currently where our servers, where the servers.
Yeah, that's where the servers are, so I don't know that we could do that. I think, well, I think you're correct, sir, in that there's often a line there, and I guess that my question was, that ought to justify more than 1 day a week. We are the largest municipality in Fayette County.
And it keeps growing, so
And it
it's just
just-
that many
but-
more people would be using it.
We're also the stepchild of Fayette County, so.
What if I tell Mitch Birch that we're fine with 1 day a week, but that we'd ask in next year's budget, future budgets, she consider additional staff here?
That'd work.
Is that the reason they're wanting to drop to 1 day a week?
Staffing, yes, sir, yes, sir.
And it is a service to the citizens.
Without question, without question.
Fuel has gone up to 3 something a gallon. I don't feel comfortable saying no, even if it's 1 day.
I think you got a good idea, maybe go 1 day the rest of this year and then see if they could do something.
Mr. Duncan, you had a question.
Yes, no statement, most certainly we wanna maintain, we don't wanna go, backwards. We don't, even to the condition. I'm a firm believer, it's not gonna stay that way always. It's not. If we could go to 2 days, but to what the vice mayor said, every other Wednesday, had it ever been on, no, it always been Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday and Wednesday.
As far as I know, now I could be corrected on that. As far as I know, it's been Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Now, I'd like to know if they can, after their staffing speak, if they can offer it 2 days a week. I do think that's a good service for our citizens.
And then the other question that I'm sure that we need to ask is how much volume does it have? You know, that may be an issue too.
I wonder if they could keep up with a month or two of how many actually using that.
I suspect they could tell you that.
Well, and again, to repeat myself, if there's room to place a kiosk in the small lobby of that building, that would give access to some services 5 days a week.
That's fine.
Would it, they be able to issue the,
It's basically for renewals.
yeah, but on renewals though, that kiosk would have to know that it's numbered on your registration, the number of that sticker. You get the registration in the mail. So how would that kiosk, if, I don't understand. how
I've
that
not
works.
used one, but I've seen them at several locations, and secondhand, I've heard people like it, because they generally don't have to stand in line.
You don't
to
know
use
where
it.
it's one at, do you?
Yes, sir, there's one in Bedford County Courthouse in Shelbyville.
Around here, that I could,
I don't.
We're not going there.
There's one in the Oakland.
have you used it, Arvin?
I have
So-
super user-friendly scan card, you put in your debit card, you get a sticker. It's in the Oakland City Hall,
So the only thing it wouldn't do is a new registration, a plate, right?
as far as I know, and it's no bigger than an ATM.
So we can put it in here, right out there, right?
Possibly. It does require an internet connection.
Yeah, they have to have internet.
The city, they using debit card. Our city, have,
We don't use a debit card, no, sir.
No.
okay, water bill, light bill.
One other thing, if I could step back.
Yes, sir.
They have, one of the reasons we probably couldn't put that unit here, although I don't know, they have a computer server in the building across the street linked to their system. It's not part of our system. Now, whether or not that would affect the kiosk, I don't know. But the kiosk in the lobby over there would be right by their server.
Well, I think I'm giving you some things to talk with her about, and you can come back with us at a later date. That's pretty much the consensus of everybody?
Yes, sir.
Could we just move this to our next month, this, November regular meeting?
Let me visit with her first. I don't know, yes, probably, but let me visit with her first.
Okay.
All right. If there are no further questions, we'll move on. Item number 8, review and discussion of preliminary report, wastewater treatment plant renovations and expansion phase 2, Wofford Engineering. Mr. Daniels, I think you're gonna be up for this.
I'm here for it.
All right.
I guess first an update, we had a phase 1.
Could you give your name and address for the record, please?
Scott Daniel,
Address.
address is 12237 Kettlewood Cove,
Okay.
Arlington, Tennessee, 38002. We had a phase 1 renovation at the plant where we were replacing a few pieces of equipment. That project had bid, we had a pre-construction meeting, and so that project is underway. Equipment's all been ordered. Equipment will probably start to show up around the first of the year. There's other pieces that have longer lead times that'll be a little later in the year, but we'll start getting a little bit of improvement at the plant as early as first part of the year. So that's an update on that part. And then I believe all y'all have a copy of the draft in their report. Answer any questions y'all have. I'll be glad to talk about it or run through a quick summary of it or however y'all would like.
Mayor, since we have people in the audience, maybe a quick summary would be appropriate.
Quick summary. When we evaluate a wastewater plant, first thing we do is kind of look at the existing plant, see unit process by unit process, what, anything that's not working or is working, any hydraulic limitations, anything like that, process by process. We also looked at about 3 years of MORs or monthly operating reports for the plant to get an idea of flow coming in and the quality of flow going out. And with those, we kind of have a baseline of where your plant is today. So then the next piece of the report is starting to look future. Typical industry standards, a 20-year planning period. That's about the given age of equipment is typically a 20-year lifespan, so 20 years is what's used. So now we start to look at the projections of population, which correlates to flow, and where that'll be 20 years from now. Looking at that, looking at y'all's growth, we use a growth rate of about 4.1% as an average. Y'all have had some years when you hit 6, over 6 a little bit, some less. So a good average of 4.1 is very reasonable. You'll have years of 6 and years of 2, so we'll average around 4. With that, looking at the 20-year growth, the 20-year planning period, you need about a 3 MGD plant, which works well with your.
Speak a little louder, please. We can't hear you back here.
Sorry.
Turn sideways if you want to.
You stand over here, Russ, and turn
I was
sideways.
gonna say,
Let me borrow your mic, Mr. Hahn.
There you go, you're a superstar.
wow. Looking at that, you need about a 3 MGD plant, 3 million gallons a day, for 20 years from now, so 2041. At the rest of the report is looking at what that project would look like. What pieces would be built, what unit process would be renovated, which ones would be replaced, and it works through unit process by unit process, and we can talk about any of those if you want. But you probably just want to get to the end, which is the price. It's expensive, there's no doubt. It's very expensive. There's nothing inexpensive.
What did you forecast your growth rate on for the next 20 years?
4.1% is what we use.
But what if you're wrong?
You're gonna have to call.
What if we're wrong?
Sir,
Don't
Please be, it's no questions from the audience.
Oh, I didn't know that, I'm sorry.
Okay,
You'll never hear another word.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry to be rude to you, but that's the policy.
I didn't know that. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right.
I will address it. We use several things. We looked at, population projections from the University of Tennessee Boyd Research Center. We had a few years of building permit data from this town, looking at how you're projecting on your building permits. And again, it calculates out, you've got some years that you're over 4, but it averaged out to 4.1.
Did you?
For this,
For the purpose of this report, you didn't know about the Ford mega site.
On our growth?
The funny thing. We try to not even get into projections. We prefer a planner to provide us projections because anything can happen. We could have a huge upturn, we could have a huge downturn, and they happen. We tend to like to have a very conservative number, and y'all do have some years of 6 and 7%, and you could grow faster. But if we project out a 20-year growth of 3 MGD, and you grow faster, all that means is you may build this plant 17 years from now, or 18 years from now. That's not a lot of risk, because it's still the same plant you would have built. The flip side of that is you can estimate the other way wrong. And
Do you
can
remember
say,
what estimate you give us in here?
Estimate,
On price?
Price-wise.
I don't know that I gave you.
You don't?
Yet,
I did not. Oh, I know it's in the report.
Your,
Is that
your
what
company,
you're asking?
your company give us an estimate on what this was gonna cost us.
The project cost. Is that what you're asking?
Yes,
What's in the report?
not the 17 million.
Okay.
8 million is what our number was.
No. We would, no.
What, you don't remember us asking about another plant you recently completed on a
We
3
did a
million
plant
gallon, and how
in-
much it cost
We did
to
a
do
plant
that?
in Trenton. It was about $9 million. That's construction only. And it's a smaller plant than this.
Well, I mean, ours is construction only as well, right? We own the
17 is-
property.
17 is total project. You've got a lot of other pieces in that cost estimate.
So what do you think the difference is in Trenton's $9 million price and our $17 million price? Time?
Not time, this is a larger project than that. They're a smaller municipality. So it was what we call more like a greenfield, in that they had an old lagoon we're building next to it. So it was a straightforward, no renovation, if you will, just simply building. The structures we built were smaller than they'll be built here. So you've got extra cost on the new construction, because it's larger structures. And then you've also got the cost of renovation of your existing structures. So those combined, you're very on par with those dollars if you work that out.
I don't see how. I mean, I don't understand.
Is ours twice as big as the one you built there?
Not quite.
But it's costing almost twice as much.
I don't see how that would matter either. It'd be merely the difference of price of the pumps and the equipment to handle that amount of water, to get
The
it in
basins
and
are
out.
larger, so you've got more concrete, more excavation. If you look at, that one's a 1.6 MGD plant, was what the size of that plant is. What this is talking about is building 2 million gallons of new construction. So
0.4 more than what they had.
plus the renovation. So if you wanna say renovation's 30% of total construction, so 30% of your 1 million gallon, so you're now building a 2.3 million gallon versus a 1.6 million gallon.
To clarify, the renovations were phase 1. Will there be additional renovations in phase 2?
Yes.
So I thought phase 1 only dealt with what we already had.
Phase one was a very temporary Band-Aid. What we did was we put a new bar screen in, because the bar screen is not functioning. We put in some submersible pumps that were not functioning. And we are changing out the aeration system in the SBRs. But we're putting a temporary aeration system in. What needs to be in there would be a full floor fine bubble diffusing system. We cannot take the basins out of service long enough to do that. We just can't, your plant's overloaded, we can't do that. So the plan is to build the expansion, get all the flow over there, then we have time to go into those SBRs, clean them out, and put in new diffusers. So what we've got is a percentage of fine bubble diffusers going in place of the coarse bubble diffusers. So it's an interim phase. The benefit is you get better oxygen transfer. And one of your limiting factors right now is your oxygen transfer.
What would be the capacity of both phases?
The proposed and what you currently got, you'd have a 3 MGD plant,
How much?
3 million gallons a day.
So what we got now?
One.
So if we double in population in the next 20 years, or 15 years, it's still gonna be enough to take care of that, right?
You'll be starting to get to the upper side of it and starting to look at what you're gonna.
Mr. Johnson?
Scott, I wanna go back to the population and building permits for a minute. The growth of Oakland for particularly the last 5 years has been residential. I would make the argument that when we get up 10, 12, 15,000, we'll see a lot more commercial development. How does commercial development affect the loading of the plant?
Quite a bit.
That's my next question.
Quite a bit. Commercial and industrial will equal.
Probably won't have industrial.
Industrial is the biggest user typically, depending on, you can have a warehouse that has very little, flow. That's your biggest user is typically industrial. After that, you can get into commercial, depending on the commercial, obviously a shoe store doesn't have much flow. But restaurants have a lot of flow, a lot of high, strength flow. Get into hotels have a lot of flow. Those type of commercial developments do push your flow up considerably.
I've expressed to Scott already, I have a concern that the population projections are low. Now, that's not to say it's gonna be a straight line growth for the next 20 years, but this is only showing a population of 13.8 by 2031, 10 years from now. And I think our building permit data would say that's too low. Now, you flip that over, that affects,
Where I was going with is if you project too high, and you say you're gonna have 10% growth every year, and then
Bottom falling out.
we say you need a 6 million gallon a day plant, and you build it, and 20 years later, you're still at 3 million gallons, then you've paid for equipment that you're now replacing because it's 20 years old and you never even needed it. So there is a balancing between overestimating and underestimating, and the 4% worked pretty well across the board. If it is faster, 6%, then yes, what it means is you still get several years of use of the plant, but you would start to look at replacing or expanding 17, 18 years from now.
What if we had to expand in 7 to 8 years from now?
You would be full with a 3 MGD plant, that would be, I won't say impossible, but that would be some
Serious growth.
serious growth. That would be a lot of flow.
Well, let me, so, and engineers here, Mr. King, I see. But we asked him for 5 projects in 17, I believe. When it was 18, of what we needed to do now. And one of those projects that he gave us was to run sewer west. And we did that. Mr. Harvey, do you know if anybody's hooked to that sewer west, and if so, how many people have hooked to that sewer west? Zero, okay? So we run this line west down 64 that our engineer told us that we needed to run. It was an immediate thing. But then turn around, we're at a capacity where we really couldn't handle that if people started using it. So I guess I'm confused on Mr. King's advice, why he didn't tell us to increase our capacity before we run that $800,000 sewer line west. Would you like to speak on that, Mr. King?
Well, yes, sir, I could. I'd really rather, if you wouldn't mind, that you and Harvey and I have a meeting on that issue.
Well, I'm
I
not at
object
liberty to
that,
have.
'cause the whole board needs to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I can't meet with y'all on that. It'd have to be as a body. But, and I don't mind that. I don't mind setting up that meeting. But I would love to know why we wasn't told about this capacity before we was told to run more line west that we can't even hook anything to because we're at capacity now. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
I'd be glad to come to any meeting, but he can't set it up with just one.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Go ahead, Mr. J.
your last comment, the last question, and again, I could be correct on this, but I believe our discharge permit to the Loosehatchee River is 3 million gallons.
Correct.
So whenever we reach 3 million gallons, we've got to go through the entire process of getting a new discharge permit.
You would modify your existing permit. And it's not a one-day flow of 3 million gallons, it's the capacity of the plant on an average daily flow. So when you grow to the point where you're expanding, say your 3 million gallon a day plant is built and you're now expanding it, you would go back to TDEC at the beginning of that project and sit down with them and negotiate a modification to your NPS permit. That typically, what we see out of them in negotiations with them, they'll typically hold your mass limits where they're at, which is your total pounds of a pollutant. And basically you will lower your concentrations so that you have more flow and a lower concentration to equal the same pounds. So you have to basically treat the water better for more capacity of it. And that's typically the way TDEC negotiates it, but that would be what you do at that time.
Loosehatchee's not a scenic river, is it?
Hatchie is.
I guess, Mr. Daniel, my concern is I'm afraid that we know that in this particular phase we're in right now, it should have been started 3, 4 years ago. We know that. It wasn't. I don't want to be in that situation 8 years from now.
And I don't think you will. Now, I know I talked with Jay earlier, and he posed a question, well, what about a 1 MGD expansion? Basically almost like a phased approach to get you to 3 MGD. And that's something we would typically look at. And I ran some numbers on that. Going with my lower numbers of 4% growth, it would have you starting the design process around 2028. The design of that second 1 MGD plant, the first 1 MGD plant would finish construction around 2024. So you would literally finish one construction in just 3 years, you'd go straight into the next one. Because the 1 MGD would get you caught up and not have a lot of excess capacity for growth. If your growth rate is steeper than that, it gets even shorter.
Would the construction time be less on a 1 MG plant?
Not noticeably.
Question.
What would the cost difference be?
Long term, it'll cost you more. It always does.
I'm not asking that. What would be your estimate of cost on a 1M?
I would have to do that, just a guess, without having one put together. Are you gonna compare total project cost of 17 million or construction cost?
The total cost.
Total cost, I would say you're probably 11 million for 1 MGD.
Can I say something on that?
Yes, sir, you can.
11 million would be a lot easier to swallow.
Yeah. And there's no doubt,
What about Trenton? When was theirs done?
about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago.
So 3 years ago, it would have cost this, they had a 1.5,
1.6.
1.6.
3
3 years ago, they got a 1.6 for 9 million.
9 million is construction only. I would have to go back and see what the total project cost was.
Mr. Tom, you had a question?
I do. So what is the population total for this 3 MGD that you're using? I know 4% is what you're projecting, but total population.
We had a population projected out at 20,682.
It's on page 14.
Page 14.
Oh, okay.
So,
A little over 20,000, 20,600.
So the population of 20,000, and you got it projected for 2041,
20 years.
and that's when we would be capacity on a 3 MGD.
Yes.
So on your number, 4% of 9,000 is what, 360 people?
Yeah. I have to calculate, I don't know.
That'd be about right, 4 times 9, right?
Be close.
360. And so you're saying at a 4% growth rate, at 360 people, let's say 400 the next year, 760, say 500 the next year is 1260. That's 3 years right there where we are. And you're saying we would already need to be planning on 1,200 and something people when we got 9,000 now? I don't understand your numbers and time on the plant. So, but 4%, maybe the 4% rate is on houses, and then you do a 2.5. Can you explain it to me, what you said? How we would meet another million? We've got 1 million now. If we put 1 million in, how come we couldn't have 9,000 more people using that system? And additional businesses we have, and one industrial person, which is our main user. How would that not equal out? I don't understand. I mean,
You're currently running about 1.3 million gallons through a 1 million gallon a day plant.
okay.
So
Sometimes.
83rd, we looked at 3 years of data and looked at your 83rd percentile, which is a standard one deviation. And that's where we use as 83rd percentile, and that was 1.3 MGD. So, when you build a 2 MGD plant, 30% of that new 1 MGD is already taken.
So 2,700 people.
So, I don't know the people, I work.
Well, we're using 9,000 as it's about where we're at. And 30% of 9,000 is 2,700 people.
So what I've said is, when you hit roughly 80% capacity, you ought to be starting the design. And then starting to have time to design and construct before you're full. So if you do that, you're not gonna wait till you're at 2 MGD to start. You're gonna start a few years before that. Calculating based on the 4.1 growth, and starting today at 1.3 MGD currently, you build a 2 MGD plant, about 2028, you're gonna start the design process for the next 1 MGD plant.
What concerns me, guys, I'm not gonna lie, I know we gotta act on this and do it. I know it is, but when you're looking at the news, at the television and reading the paper, there's gonna be $230 million that Ford's gonna have for infrastructure to growth areas that plant's gonna affect. Money sitting out there to get. I mean,
Do you think
I don't know, is this something, I mean, if you've already started a project, can you dip into them funds, or,
While the money's been allocated in the legislation, to my knowledge, and I could be again, I have no knowledge at all yet of what that money is for, where it will go, how it will be allocated. There's no information on that. What I can talk, if you want to talk about funding for just a minute, and these are some decisions the board will have to make, but the state is putting emphasis on the American Rescue Plan funding that we received on water, wastewater, and broadband. Oakland's allocation is $2.2 million. If the board chooses, that entire $2.2 million could be allocated to this project. Second, as Alderman Fisher and Alderman Duncan heard when we were in Chattanooga last month. The state, the governor has proposed taking part of the state's American Rescue Plan funding and allocating it to local government for broadband, water, and wastewater projects. That program has not been fully defined. It won't be fully defined till after the holidays. But preliminarily, they're saying that they would match dollar for dollar any monies that a city put into water, wastewater, or broadband. So it is possible that by next spring, we could have 4.4 million to dedicate to this project.
But that's kind of what I asked though, is that on existing projects or is that on new projects? And that's my question.
The American Rescue Plan money, which is separate from the 200 million, is for new projects, and it has to go through their process and be approved. It's not for existing. Now, they are talking, and one of the terms that they used that day was shovel-ready projects, but it's not for a project that's already under contract. Would you agree with that, Scott?
If it's already under construction.
So would we be considered under contract since we've hired an engineer?
No, all we've authorized is engineering, and that is what you do to get a project shovel-ready.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And the other thing that we're ahead, and I know this sounds minuscule, but it's not. We own the property. We don't have to go through the acquisition process that the state and the federal government has. You all know
So
that.
you're still looking at about 13 million?
Yes, but I'll jump ahead and tell the board, and I've already told Scott this. I think with our current population, the impact to our ratepayers on a debt of $17 million is just too big a bite. Now, I don't know how much plainer I can say that. That is a big bite for us. Now, you're getting close. You take the 4.4 million off, then maybe it's not as large, but if we did one or whatever number, use the 11 million that Scott talked about, and we've got 4.4 maybe, then all of a sudden we're talking 6.5. That becomes much more doable in my opinion.
Well, that's only the waste facility.
I know.
We have other projects that we need, and, I mean,
Yes, but the 4.4 million, or the 2.2 million, start with it, can only be spent, in our case, on water, wastewater, or
I got
broadband.
that, but if we're gonna start borrowing money for any of the projects, then we need to.
Well,
We have to look at what we need and what we want.
This is the time that we can
And
uh,
jump into what you want to add.
this is also, and I don't know how much detail you went into it, but this will be utility fund debt. It will have the GO backing, but this will be utility fund debt, and it is to be paid through the ratepayers.
While we're on this subject, do we know our bond to debt ratio?
Under the state of Tennessee law, there is no limitation on local government borrowing. Right now, you have no direct general obligation debt, the town of Oakland. We just issued $800,000 on the streets. We pledged our state street aid revenue backed by our general obligation bonds. We have 2 outstanding state revolving loan funds on the water and wastewater system that are being paid for by the water and sewer system. Again, they are backed by the general obligation of the city. We have less than $3 million in total debt right now.
That was what I wanted, is 14, folks. You can look at it. I have the sheet that was in your thing.
I got a question.
Okay.
For you.
Okay.
So, this is like deciding on if you want to do it 1 or 3,
I
sounds
knew
like.
we could use it in there.
The average cost, over, I mean, I know you can't foresee the future, but what's the average percentage as the cost rises? Say we built the 1 million, right? And then more, 20% more?
It would probably be less expensive than the first one, like right now. I mean, I would say, yes, there'll be inflation, but there are some pieces that will be built that you don't have to rebuild.
So we already have that in place.
Yeah, that's what I mean, it's not a, just a complete building block that you're adding to. Yes, the SBRs would be completely new, but, for instance, the headworks. Knowing that the other one is coming right behind it, we would go ahead and hydraulically design it for the future, so that you don't have to touch it again. Which is why it's not, you don't just take the price and cut it in half. If you tried to cut it and design it specifically for that with no future thought, then you will pay a lot more for it, because you'll have to truly redo everything.
Well, this is the, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So that's why, in round number, I mean, you always pay more for something long-term if you put it in phases.
Sure.
Because contractors come in multiple times and they mobilize and demobilize, and there's escalation of cost over time with materials and labor as well. So it always costs more in phases.
Well, what I'm concerned with is getting this out of the red, immediate. And then for Mr. Johnson, you know, don't know if it's appropriate to get that deep in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and funding is always a big topic to be discussed. I mean, I know y'all have used funding agents before, and I would strongly recommend a meeting with them. I'd be glad to attend. To piggyback on what Jay had said, another place, I know SRF, y'all have used them in the past. They're not the fastest, but they have very low interest rates. And they are also getting a portion of the recovery money, so the thought is they will have more principal forgiveness in some upcoming loans on projects. They can't have grants.
So.
Okay, wait, let me stop right there, Mr. Hine. I think Mr. Jay's got something he
I
wants
just
to
want to say
add right
something
into
because
this.
I think it's important for the board and for the public. The three bond issues that we have outstanding, or the three capital outlay notes we have outstanding, all three have interest rates of less than 2%. So we are, what debt the city has is at a very attractive interest rate in today's environment.
And SRF provides that, a very, very low interest rate.
So.
All right, Mr. Hine, go ahead.
What I'm thinking is, we've got a warrant, if we add it over, that gives us some potential growth there, to where we can start planning and see this growth mature, and then start planning the next one, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Now, granted, it's gonna be more expensive in the long term. Seems like it's a middle ground to me.
It is.
Perfect.
And if y'all would like a copy.
This ain't something we gotta vote on tonight anyway.
Oh, no, sir, no.
This is information on
No,
this.
this is information only, it's a draft report.
I think we may need a workshop on this.
Yeah, but let me, if I may, Mayor.
Yes, sir, go right ahead.
What we need to ask, a work session would be fine, but recognizing that time is critical, at some point very soon, we need to ask the board to authorize Lawford to begin the design of whatever expansion we're going to do. We need to make some decisions relatively soon.
Well, I have a question that will determine my decision on that. And my question is, if we do have to borrow $12 million, and let's say it's a 30-year note, that's $400,000 a year without interest, okay? It's my understanding, and maybe the attorney or one of y'all can tell me different, but it's my understanding that a city service can neither show a profit or a loss.
Well, I don't want you, it cannot show a loss. If it shows a loss, you have to raise your rates.
Okay, so at us paying back $400,000 a year, how is that gonna affect our sewage rate for the citizens? I mean, what have we got, 5,000 houses?
A little over 5,000.
5,000 houses on this, you know, you go to putting that into $400,000 and I think it's about that.
I don't have a calculator with me. What is 400,000 divided by 5,000?
Somebody add that up, it's about $800 a year?
80, just 80?
And divide that,
And you? 80 ain't too bad.
and divide that.
By 12.
Divide that by 12, so you're in $6-7 increase. Now, the good news on that, to go back, if, I'm sorry, were you doing the full 3?
Well, I know it wouldn't be 80 to the residents because your businesses and industrial would be paying more. But
Yeah.
even if it was, I mean, you still wouldn't be looking at a huge amount to raise the sewage rates to pay for it. That's what I'm saying. So,
Let me finish the second part of your question. We can make, and I'll use the term profit in water and sewer, but it has to stay in the water and sewer fund as retained earnings. You cannot transfer it to the general fund and things like that.
so at 12 million, saying the 4.4, I mean, you're looking at probably, I'm gonna guess on an average resident would probably be about on the rate, unless you raised your base. And of course, you could raise your base and it would be equal, but that probably ain't the way to go. But at that rate, we know growth's coming, we know Ford's coming. You know, I hate to do something and naturally have to start it over when we get this done. I do. And at that rate, I mean, it appears that we're gonna have to raise sewage rates to pay for it anyway, regardless of which one we do. And so, I mean, I'd like some more concrete numbers. Are you needing a vote on this tonight?
No, sir. My goal, and I don't know if this matches with what the schedule might be, we probably need to make a vote on this in January. If you'll remember the earlier discussion when we started this, we wanted to have some plans by the state by the middle of 2022. And the calendar keeps moving on us.
I don't think we can be, I mean, I think we could be prepared to vote, we could get enough information to vote next month. I'd like to get it underway as soon as possible. I mean, we got a crisis. But I would like to look at some numbers and see how, I mean, do we even know how we compare on sewage rates compared to other places?
I have not compared Oakland's, no, sir. I can tell you from my other places I've looked were slightly low, but I haven't compared them with this area.
But if we did borrow this money, we would have no choice. I mean, by law, we would have to raise the rates, right?
Or identify the revenue to repay it.
Now, depending on how big a plant we build, I mean, but I can't see building one and then starting one over when we get through with it, I can tell you that.
My concern is that with this Ford plant coming in, with what we know we already got in the pipeline, what, 1,500
Just
lots
under 50.
and more coming.
Well, they're saying 2,200. The guy on the planning commission that attached houses to it on every one of them and counted them, he's saying 2,200.
22 to 24.
I'm a little surprised that high. There's been, since we did that report last July, or thereabouts, there's probably been 2 or 3 subdivisions approved. I would, it's probably 1,700 or 1,800, yes, sir. I don't know if it's over 2,200.
Well, he Steve attached the building permits, he got that information and attached them to the new developments, and he come up with a number of 2,200.
Did he subtract the lots that the building permits were issued on?
I don't know.
So those were just houses on the pipeline for the next 3 years.
Are you familiar with that? You were in that meeting too.
Yes, and that's what I was saying. He just said it's in the pipeline for the next 3 years. Well, this is gonna start in 2 years, maybe.
Yes,
We're already gonna be
yes.
up
We're behind the
sheets
curve. We're behind
and
the curve.
pillows.
Mr. Welch, I know you've been told not to speak, but I do have a question for you. Since the day you started,
Wait a minute. Mr. Welch, would you mind asking the vice mayor's question, please?
since the day you started that project, how long of time will pass before the first house is occupied?
Well, as soon as this contract's signed, I'm gonna tell you 7 months,
So how long have you been working on it already?
2 years.
2 years and 7 months, so
It's about 3 years.
about 3 years.
Right, that's what we were told.
And that's a small how many houses is on that one?
41.
41.
Yeah, that's small.
So that's relatively small compared to what we're seeing. So 2 years, 7 months since the first one.
They told us roughly 3 years from the time they
Yeah.
started till the first house.
On the other hand, we have a developer that I think pulled like 6 or 7 permits for one subdivision in one day.
And we went over and visited, and he started that all of them already.
He's pouring all 6, 7 slabs same day. And it's a different product than what Mr. Welch builds, but I mean, and again, I'm repeating myself, but I still think, once we get up to 10,000 or thereabouts, and we're probably there, we're gonna see a lot more commercial activity.
It's,
No, I mean, it's.
So, Mr. Daniel, if we can get you started by December, early January, we're in good shape with your company.
Now the question is,
To get it
One
designed by
point
mid-year, yes.
or
Now,
two?
The question's gonna be funding. I mean, funding, it will play a huge piece in the timing, the timing of everything.
The other thing we talked about in our interview process with you and other firms was TDEC's review process.
TDEC is, yes.
Really?
It's changed a lot recently. There'll be a kickoff meeting, there'll be a couple of meetings in between. We've got a good relationship with them, but it is a process. When we get to the final though, we've already met with them, they know the plans pretty well, and it's still about a 30-day window at the end. So it's not a deal breaker.
It's quite possible
Let's
there's
move on.
going to be 315 cities with plans before them.
There's a lot of growth talk throughout the state. I mean, you know, Middle Tennessee's booming.
I'm talking about the rescue plan money, if it all goes to water and sewer. So, they have to include all those plans.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
With this Ford facility coming up, they're gonna use a lot of concrete, okay? Is that gonna hinder your ability to get concrete? Price is gonna skyrocket?
they'll have their own concrete
They
plant
put
set up
theirs
on
on
that
site.
property, and we'll,
Okay, so what?
They usually put theirs on site, there's a concrete plant. They did the other 2 places that I know of.
Yeah, but nationwide materials are getting harder and harder to get to. It's in all building industry.
And that's part of that
Labor-
raising up prices.
Labor costs right now and material costs are high. There's no doubt.
In
Well,
this area, they're gonna get higher.
It's only gonna get higher, and the interest rates are only gonna get higher.
So I think the quicker we move on this, the better
Let's
off
go.
we're gonna be.
I think can I ask you that question?
Which question?
The quicker we get you that, the better off we'll be?
Yes.
Cheaper will be.
Well, I'm gonna ask that it be put on the agenda for next month's regular meeting.
That's fine.
Did you meet that deadline?
Well, I'm gonna ask, clarify, what do you want on the, do you want the contract with Walford?
Yeah, I think we need to see, unless there's a reason why we shouldn't.
Contract for
Well, like you said,
Design.
funding.
1 million or 2 million.
I think the discussion's been 2, but I'll defer.
I just don't.
What's the board's feelings on the 1 or 2? Mr. Hahn, 1 or 2?
Just show a finger.
All right, Mr. Hines, we're not gonna pin you down on that.
I say do it once. It's gonna
Okay.
take us out to 2046, build it once.
Mr. Cates, what you think?
It's, I don't, 6 of 1/2 dozen to me, it don't matter. I'm just with the board on it.
Yeah, I mean,
Duncan,
Mr. Duncan, you are comfortable with 2 million?
that would be our best bet. I think so
you're
too.
correct.
I think so.
I always rely on Mr. Duncan, cause he's gonna tell it like it is. Mr. Fisher?
I was there first.
Yeah.
2 million.
All right, Scott, we've wheeled you around for a long time here. You've handled it well. I appreciate it. Mr. Welch, I appreciate your contribution. And my rudeness to you, I apologize for, but I needed to have quiet.
You ain't the one that made him mad. I made him mad early on in the meeting.
Already?
That is true. And it's gonna cost him a good cigar too, Mr. Welch.
He ain't laughing.
I think we're through with that, Mr. Johnson. We'll move on.
Think we
Number 9,
Really? this agenda.
Review and discussion of Main Street Building Inspection Report, Fisher and Arnold. Mr. Townsend. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for allowing me the chance to speak. I assume that you'd like to also have me give a summary of my report, since we have people in the audience. Is that correct?
Yes, please.
I know that everybody here should have a copy of the report. There was a written portion, some drawings, and many photographs. And basically what we were asked to do at Fisher Arnold was come and evaluate visually and architecturally some buildings on Main Street. I think formerly a bank building, they've had many uses recently. And so part of our goal was to, one, come out, evaluate, kind of take a main assessment, look at what we could see with our eyes, and evaluate what might be required if someone desired to bring the building into service, meaning it could be used on a daily basis for whatever the intended use is. What we found was building had not been actively used for a little bit, so we see many deficiencies or things that would need to be corrected. They're obvious through many active leaks and signs of water intrusion, that a new roof would be part of that. I think there were some buckets that were filled with water towards the back from roof leaks. There were a lot of, at least the visible, seemed to be some visible mold growth in a considerable portion of the building. At the time that we were there, the AC units were not on or operational. Couldn't determine whether they could work, they just weren't on. Plumbing systems obviously had not been used in some time, so there were some potential issues there, things like that. And so at the end of our visual inspection, tried to put together a recommendation, what would be required to bring the building back so that somebody could use it. And there are many things. You mentioned the roof. On the inside, what you would do is you need to, at a bare minimum, take everything down to the structure. So there's different structural, I guess, techniques that are applied, because there are multiple buildings that have been connected over time. So there's some load-bearing walls, some of wood studs, some of masonry, seem to be some steel and bar joists for parts of it as well. And so part of that is taking everything down to that, because there is so much mold, etc. You'd want to get all material out, whether it's flooring material, wallboard, things that, that could inhabit. So that would need to come out before any renovation happened. There were a couple of areas where there's a concern, given the age of the building and some of the materials seen, concern of possibility of some asbestos and some floor tile and things like that, maybe some mastics and even the roof there. So if it were to go forward, certainly a certified testing and abatement agency would need to be employed to confirm that. Let's see, what else do we have here?
Would that be the same with the mold?
So,
Mold and mildew?
those things are treated a little differently, yes. So asbestos is very strictly regulated for obvious reasons. Mold is not so much. However, given the amount of it that's visible, I would also recommend pursuing a company come in, either give an evaluation or also provide services there, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
It's not small enough an area where somebody or town services could take care of it.
If the building, I'll say, is gutted,
Yes.
how does that address the asbestos?
So, depending on what is found, how much is found, and where it is, determines what the technique is made to remove it. So if it's just a flooring material or something like that, I could see a situation where they would come in first, remove all the asbestos material before anything else happens. Because obviously the danger with asbestos is when it gets kicked up into the air, that's when it's a danger. If it's left, on the floor or something like that, it's okay. So it really is a kind of function of what do we find and how much and what's the danger. Kind of get to the conclusion conclusion at the end, I'm sure we can revisit any of these parts as you have questions. Conclusion at the end is based on what I think the intended function is, and based on the current state of the building, our recommendation would be to at least consider or perhaps pursue new construction for whatever uses you're intending. And there's a lot of kind of factors that go into that. Happy to answer any questions regarding it too.
What would be the projected cost per square foot for a new construction?
So that is very difficult to determine at the time. Part of that is due to many material increases that we've seen, not just over the last year.
Well, it's decreasing right now.
Of some things, sure. But for instance, roofing material, we've been in consultation with some roofing consultants, and they're saying that their backlog is such that,
I understand.
you know.
I
so
know
it-
shingles are a big problem.
Yeah. And this is even for, you know, rigid insulation, for membrane type roofs. You may.
So you hadn't worked on any projects to tell me what commercial construction per square foot?
No, that's not true. What I was getting at was, based on this time here, which is we have to settle for square foot estimates based on a type of building without much detail, so we don't have any plans or anything to propose that we get a cost on, is you have to use historical data and a lot of assumptions. And my point is, right now, our historical data does not match up with what we know is the current climate and unfortunately the immediate future. That being said, new construction right now, I'd have to put it 200 to 250 a square foot. Now, obviously, that depends on size and what kind of use and all kinds of things.
Any questions for Mr. Townsend? All right.
That's $80 to $70 per square foot more than the estimate you give on the renovation.
180.
So if you're $19 a square foot in that property, what would you be better off doing?
Could you repeat the question or maybe
If
rephrase
you,
it?
if the estimates you give me, you're $80 to $70 higher on new construction per square foot than you were on renovation estimate.
No, this is 20,
So if we're $19 a square foot in that property, what would be your recommendation?
Well,
We're right now $19 a square foot in that property, which would put us at $139 to $199 a square foot compared to $200 to $250 a square foot.
so recommendations are based on lots of inputs. So money is part of it, right? And then also the uses. So right now, to renovate that project, you have several things to consider. One, its current size. Doesn't seem like it could get much bigger, if any. So you'd have to determine if the current space needs will meet whatever is envisioned for the space. Now, I don't know the details of that. Secondly, the way that building is constructed, we have several load-bearing walls that kind of subdivide up the space that may make it hard to use the space how you'd like to, if that makes sense. So it may be in the wrong places, things that are hard to modify, wouldn't necessarily recommend moving load-bearing walls, et cetera. Columns are different, but we don't seem to have many of those in this project. So that being said, also it's a renovation project, which lots of things that we already know and can see are potential issues. Whenever you do a renovation, you're always liable to find things that you couldn't predict or see, much more likely than a new construction. And so here, given the amount of things that we already can
But isn't that
see-
why you have the range, sir? Ain't that why we don't know if it's 120 or 180? Ain't that the range? For things you can't see or may not see?
Part of that.
Yes, sir.
My question is, concerning Fisher Armor. You all the one did the evaluation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, did you all put an eagle eye on that building?
I'm sorry?
An eagle eye?
Eagle eye.
Oh, you
Eagle
mean,
eye.
Eagle Eye?
Yeah, they see the findings.
No, sir.
question for him?
You're looking at a new construction of about, what, about 3 million?
It depends entirely on how big it is.
Well, say it's the same spot we got, that whole area. Rough estimate, doesn't have to be true,
That'd be 2.5.
2.5 to 3, because we got equipment that's gotta go inside it.
Be more than
It
that.
don't have to be spread out, it's cheaper to build up than it is out too. You can put 2 stories and make it a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
Okay, because the foundation don't have to be moved, the concrete, if we're going new, the concrete is solid.
Well, so that's part of the things that you can't necessarily see or
Predict.
evaluate until you've done some of the demolition, right? So what I would recommend certainly is if that's the process going forward to tear down or at least be able to see what's there, then an engineer would do some calculations to determine, can they be reused? If so, how much, things like that.
I'm glad I asked that question because he brought up a point that on the weight-bearing walls and stuff, on being able to design what would accommodate what you need. I mean, that's the, I mean, you could renovate the building, true enough, but you couldn't determine what goes where and how big your rooms are and things of that nature. So I'll have to think about that for a couple of days. And that drawing shows that as well, don't it?
So it does not call them out, but you can see when you look at it, there are several walls that are much thicker than the surrounding walls.
Right.
And those are what we have assumed are the load-bearing walls. Some of them are masonry, you can see that, and it's that 2-story structure, so you can see that those.
I guess my only other question would be, I call it over there, you got a new side and an old side.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the building?
Yes, sir.
So you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So the new side, I mean, I guess we need to learn to be more specific in what we hire somebody to do, because I didn't need to hire nobody to tell me there were stains on that carpet. You know, or a threshold was missing. I would have wanted more of a structural report than to tell me pay somebody to tell me it needed new carpet in it. But comparing those two sides, what would it take to move in that new side tomorrow?
So, one, you would want to determine whether the existing HVAC equipment is operational.
It is.
Right. So you want to do that. The bathrooms themselves, obviously hadn't been used in some time, so there was some smell and things there, so that would need to be investigated by a plumber, make sure that whatever issue is there is solved. In terms of finishes, that too, there was many water damage spots on the ceilings, so I would assume that also came from a roof that might need to be replaced. So those are those things. Obviously, anytime you do a renovation.
So we did an engineering report and we don't know if the roof needs to be replaced?
It most certainly does.
Okay. All right. Roof replaced. HVAC, plumbing, anything else?
Most of the finishes on the new side, I believe you're referring to the west side, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Third.
Yes, sir.
Most of the finishes were acceptable. Some of the walls were a little bit damaged. Janitor's closet had some mold and things that we want to take care of. Many of the lights, I don't know if the bulbs were just need to be changed, things like that. We tried to flip all the switches to get them all to come on, but not all of them did. So that would need to be evaluated.
May I ask, is that site compliant with current code?
So, for an existing building.
You gonna ask about this one too?
I can.
So for anything that's existing, you first start with the existing building code. And then you go to, are you doing anything to it? If you are, how much are you doing? And that feeds you into different decision trees and different things that are required.
Before we get into this, I want you to know that we done been told by our code and it was compliant with existing code.
Okay.
I just gonna give you that piece of information that he was
question-
asked several times.
I specifically
How wide is it?
If I were guessing, I'd say 39 feet, or 39 inches, I've not measured it. I just wondered, I'm asking, could that become an issue?
I think that would be on a new build. I don't think that if we went into any business today and they were wanting to move in there, we would make them change the hallways on it. If I mean,
It depends upon the amount of interior renovation they're doing. I'm sorry, is it 50%?
No, it's not necessarily that
but what he just explained, it's little to no interior renovation of what's needed on that building to move in tomorrow.
Without knowing what you need it for, I can only speak to the condition of the finishes and things that we can see.
Air conditioner. Air conditioner works. I had to put a coat on when I was in there this summer.
And to speak to your hallway width, that's actually dependent on the use of the building as well. So depending on what the intended new or existing intended.
And don't that
use
have to
is,
do with where the public has access as well?
It could.
Yes, it could.
It could. But requirements for a warehouse are different than for an office space. And depends on the size of the office space for when certain things are required, when they are.
So the one side's bad, the middle's not so bad, and the activity center just needs a roof.
Now, when you say activity center, you mean a building adjacent to?
That was the first report he gave us.
Okay. So you didn't look at that one, you just looked at the other two?
He looked at the other one first,
We really
or
got that one
somebody
right.
did with his company.
What's the cost of
You done?
I'm done.
120 to 180 a square foot?
Yeah.
That's the range.
He's done.
Mr. Hine,
Yes, sir.
are you done?
Okay.
Mr. Townsend, thank you for talking with us. I'm not sure we know what we're gonna do, but thank you for talking with us.
Very well.
I'm sure we're gonna get the pleasure of doing this again.
Happy to come back.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks, sir.
Moving on.
Kind of good news.
Review and discussion of town charter and amendments. Mr. J.
The board asked that this be on the agenda to begin a process to look at the charter for changes that could be submitted to the legislature when they reconvene in January. Really, it's what you might want to ask and what Tom might recommend. If we're gonna submit it in January, we need to do this over the next 2 months.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
I just think we need a workshop, and we need to go over it with a fine tooth comb, and make sure we don't make any mistakes.
Agreed.
Dot the i's and cross the t's.
Do you have any suggestions for a workshop day?
Not on Thanksgiving Day, not on Christmas Day, I'm good with the rest of them. Mr. Hahn, I know you have restrictions. Could you get Mr.,
It's coming down.
anybody that has some conflicts, if they could just send Mr. Johnson?
I'll take care of it.
I think the rest of us are somewhat flexible. All right,
I can't do it next Monday, I know.
Next Monday's good.
No, I can't go Monday.
okay, moving on. Review and discussion of Fayette County adequate facilities tax and road improvements. One I've been waiting on. Mr. J.
I can go as in-depth as much as you might like tonight. As you recall, several months ago, really about after the beginning of the year, Vice Mayor Sutton brought up questions and concerns about the adequate facilities tax, and many of you seconded that. I undertook a little project and looked at the county audits for the last well, I went back to 2005, beginning the adequate facilities tax, and looked at the revenue and expenditures for adequate facilities tax. And then I looked at how that money had been transferred out of the adequate facilities tax and where it had gone. It had gone basically to 4 funds: general fund, public safety equipment, highway fund, general debt, debt retirement, and general debt school board. And the school board was only 1 year out of the last 15. After that, the mayor wrote a letter to the county mayor, Mr. Taylor, asking for specific information on the roads. To stop for a second, as you all know, adequate facilities tax is a tax levied on new development related to growth and is to be expended for capital expenditures to address that growth. It cannot be used for operations. It took a while, but the county did provide to me a summary listing of the street projects, the name of the street, and the type of the project over the last 15 years. What I have done over the last 2 weeks or so, to the enjoyment of many people, my coloring, you have a map of the county. Probably can't see this very well, I apologize. You can look at it, you have a great view. You can look at it when your time allows. But if it's blue, it's asphalt resurfacing. If it's green, it's chip and seal. If it's orange, it's coal mix asphalt. If it's purple, it's striping. Yellow is patch paving. I don't know what that is. Let me start with one thing. I would make an argument, from my experience and my knowledge, that chip and seal and striping of roads are not capital improvements. Now, the information I have does not break down the budget for these projects. But what you see here is where they've spent the money from the adequate facilities tax over the last 15 years. North of Galloway, northeast part of the county, southeast of LaGrange, the middle of the county here, middle of the county south of Willis. Some projects in every whip area.
Did you check on how much these districts by the new census has grown?
I have not, no sir. This information went through 2021 audit.
If all this money right here in this district, and I think this is a district here, on the census side, voting map, but if they hadn't had the growth of adequate facilities tax to pay for what's been done here, that old Jackson Road's a long road, and it's really nice, too, they did a good job on that. But I don't think there's been any growth out there, that's a lot of farmland. But if it's for the growth areas, then if all this money was spent here and they hadn't had growth or taxes paid to fund that, would they be in compliance? And I tell you who may be able to answer some more of these questions for us is Mayor Waters. I think that she actually, took them to court or had some deal on this. I'd love to hear from you on this, of what you found out about this.
I apologize, Ms. Waters. I didn't include you on our meeting.
Put her on the spot.
So, what we were talking about when we hired an attorney was related to.
Ms. Waters, I'm sorry, you mind coming up here? I'm having trouble hearing you back there.
You have a soft voice.
No, one of my hearing aids is gone.
Okay. What do you want me to say? I didn't come to the restroom, but okay.
I just have trouble.
You look great. Let's go.
One of my hearing aids is out. I don't have but one. I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
So what we did, I guess it's, Tom, a couple of years ago. The county commission was trying to pass an arbitrary increase in the adequate facilities rate that would be passed on to the developers. The current rate is 60 cents per thousand, and the motion was to increase that to $1 a thousand. several of the cities hired, were represented by their attorneys and an outside counsel. And we brought it before the county commission, and it wasn't that it was defeated, it just kept moving further down the agenda to the next meeting, to the next meeting, to the next meeting, and then it was dropped. So I hate to even bring up forest fire. I'm a little concerned they might do it again. Our builders were encouraging us not to do it because it was such a huge cost and penalty on them. So we didn't talk about allocations. We reviewed that, but we didn't talk about that with the board. We were simply talking about the laws. Tom represented Rossville and I think Oakland at the time too. So he was there too, but it just kind of died. Is that right, Tom? Is that what you did?
Right, and, of course, the attorney that we had hired, I mean, he wrote a very strong letter to the county commission. You guys know the lawyer I'm talking about, the same one that you guys had consulted.
Yeah.
And then he made a very good and very strong presentation to the county commission that night. I think that had a lot of impact in terms of getting the county commission to maybe just kick it down the road to a point where it was kind of faded away.
Mr. Johnson?
While she's standing here, to answer one of your other questions from the vice mayor, the mayor and I, and Mayor Waters, we've spent a lot of time the last month on county redistricting. And just in terms of gross numbers, if you will, Oakland, Piperton, and Rossville had more population growth head count than the county as a whole. So to your point about growth in the northeast part of the county, no. The growth in the county based upon the census data is clearly in Oakland, Piperton, and Rossville.
I'll tell you something I would love to make a request on. I would like to make a public records request. And I'd like to know when this committee has met, the Adequate Facilities Tax Committee, and I'd like to see the minutes on the meetings for the past 15 years and see how they voted to spend this money or advised the commissioners to spend this money. Mr. Powers, did you?
I sit on the development committee. It was our committee that originally came through. I can tell you, as far as I know, there is no Adequate Facilities Tax Committee.
The mayor sent us one.
There is, and I'm not aware of it.
It's David Ledyard, that lives at 186 Lake. He's a neighbor of yours. He lives right there at Lakewood Drive, right?
We don't call it Rossville.
Yeah, 180 Lakewood Drive, Oakland, Tennessee. He's your neighbor. And then Richard Settles,
Well, it's.
Ezel Williams, and Ernestine Brown.
I stand corrected. It's not something that I've seen. We're brought.
Have you ever heard from the committee as a commissioner?
No, we don't hear from the committee. We get a report from the mayor.
Yeah, I would love to see the minutes from their meetings, and I would love to know when they met and when their next meeting is.
So noted.
I would agree.
Mayor Waters, thank you. And I apologize again. I didn't, when I invited you.
Thank you, Ms. Waters.
I do apologize to you for bringing you into our meeting.
Ms. Waters, this is
That's
how you
two
say,
cigars he's going with me
we
tonight.
ain't in Kansas anymore.
Okay.
With those things said, Administration, you gonna
So what are we
look
gonna do
into
about it?
that?
I will
See, can
ask
you
the county for copies of the minutes of the prior meetings of the Facilities Tax Committee for the past 15 years. And when is their next meeting?
I think if you know, when you look at that map a little closer, most of you looked at it, I found it extremely interesting when I was looking at it, that there wasn't a lot of that done around Oakland.
Nope.
I can tell you this, about 60% of the money.
It's on the top. Green is chip and seal. The majority of the roads have been chip and seal.
Could you get a figure how much we paid them the last 5 years?
No, I could, I mean, I could make that request, but they, in all fairness, they probably don't keep it
It
like that.
wouldn't be hard, it should be in our computer system, we collected it on building permits.
I think
No,
Mayor Waters maybe would help us here.
Just a comment, I do know that their budget for roads is about $1.5 million a year.
No.
Counselor?
In-
We know what what the tax is there for. It's two projects.
So right now, how much is it?
Wait just one
60?
second. Wait just one second. What are the two projects?
He said if,
You do not wish to reveal that at this time?
I can tell you this, if we pulled permits, if we did a average of 3,000 square feet per house on 200 building permits, that's 600,000 square feet at 60 cents is 360,000
Y'all pay more than that.
a year. And that's a low number.
That's
but
a low number.
Some expensive paint.
To go back to the point of the highway budget's 1.5, in 2019, ag facilities tax, $270,000 was transferred to the highway fund. And the year before that is 150, the year before that 148. So they've been pretty consistent, 150, 200,000 a year from ag facilities tax to the highway department.
So if you go back 15 years on that, a lot of money.
Sound like somebody got a deep pocket.
There's some nice roads up there. Somewhere.
So they're not in Rossville, are they?
Well, they're not in Oakland either.
I wonder who lives on Old Jackson Road. Get that paving instead of chip and seal.
I'll be tacky, I wanna know
Oh,
who
a
lives
lot
in the
of fun.
southeast corner of the county.
Down at what?
You know anybody that lives on Old Jackson Road?
Galloway.
Grand Junction?
Yeah, that's where they put that deer at.
That one road in the southeast part of the county is a dead-end road.
Good job.
Sounds about right.
Okay,
Well,
we wanted to get that information to you. We thought that was something you might want to consider, and we'll probably have some recommendations on where to go on with that information in the near future.
Thank you, Ms. Waters, for your information.
Yeah, thank you.
Come back again.
Too much.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I'd like the members of the council, my relationship with Mayor Waters went downhill bad tonight. All right.
Moving on.
We through with the adequacy tax. Consideration of temporary contractor agreement.
The special meeting, was there a conflict with it?
No, that was originally scheduled related to the proposed bond issue for the phase one of the park property.
So,
That's where that date came from.
Basically tabled.
okay. All right.
Moving to the temporary contract agreement, Mr. J.
At your last meeting, Alderman Cates and several of you made a suggestion that possibly the chamber could assist with the Christmas parade. I talked to the chamber Tuesday morning. They are very interested in partnering with the town. They would help with advertisement, promotion. They would help with registration. I asked if they would help the day of the parade with organization. But any event, they will do it as part of our membership of the chamber at no additional cost. And they are very interested in being a, if you will, a co-sponsor of the Oakland Christmas parade. So therefore, we do not need temporary help.
Was that where this letter came from?
I'm sorry, I can't see it from here.
You got
The
to
one that
see 'em.
wanted, spend $1,000?
That was the first option that was
Who
discussed.
came up with this,
Parks and Recreation Department.
sir?
Parks and Recreation Department. Right now, Parks and Rec is a one-person office. We're advertising for the assistant. Right now, it's a one-person office. And we needed some help for the Christmas
So she
parade.
did this on her own? No help from nobody?
I'm sorry.
Contacted this lady?
Contacted the lady, yes. That's a standard form the city uses.
But she did this on her own with no help,
I was aware of it.
sir?
I was aware of it. Because we talked we talked to another lady, and I said no to that one. We did an outreach to another person, and I said no.
How did she know this lady to start with?
I have no idea.
I got some questions for her, but I guess we're gonna go to executive meeting. What?
I'm here.
She said she froze.
Is it okay to ask, or should we wait?
I guess we can. Tori, come up.
I guess you heard the questions I've already asked. Did you know this lady personally?
Miss Holland,
Yes.
members of the community in general put me in contact.
Did what? I'm sorry?
Members of the community in general have put me in contact with her. I contacted several people, just looking to kind of get ahead on the Christmas parade. I talked to our Spring Fest coordinator, that helped out in the spring. I've talked to members of the chamber individually. That's how I, came to her contact information.
Was there an alderman involved in talking to her and meeting with her as well?
To Miss Holly,
Did y'all meet about this?
I met with Miss Holly myself. I ran into her at soccer, one Saturday.
So there wasn't an alderman that met on this that you talked to about it?
No, sir. I met with her at her office.
So you hadn't consulted with the alderman about this?
I believe the topic came up in general conversation.
Well, that's what I'm
No, that's-
asking. I wanna know.
Yeah, but no formal meetings, no, sir.
Who was? Well, nothing. We're going to meet. Was this letter dated the 21st? The one we got on the table is no date. The one I pulled off the computer is dated on, October the 21st, 2021.
I don't have a copy of your packet, so I
This,
can't
I pulled this off of the email.
Okay, the letter may have been dated that the form may have. I don't believe it was signed until last week.
No, it was not signed until you asked me to get it signed.
Did you
Yeah.
know about this at our last meeting 2 weeks ago, on the 21st?
Sir?
Did you know about this then, 2 weeks?
That was in talks. It was between when you asked me to get it signed and between the meetings.
That contract's executed on the 21st.
Didn't you, have a meeting with your Parks and Rec directors and your board and discuss all this on your last meeting? Cause I was
think
there.
it was the 14th.
Yeah.
Is the date on that letter?
She talked.
It's the 21st.
That's right, we met on the 21st, so it was either done after our meeting or it was done that day.
Right, cause she talked to us on the 21st.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
We were
okay.
here, it was
That-
on the agenda,
Okay, no. The agenda packet went out to you for this meeting at 5 o'clock last Thursday,
Right.
which is the
Brought it
20,
up.
which was the 21st. So yes, it was probably dated the 21st, but it was in the packet for this meeting.
I just saw it on the computer and pulled it up on the 21st. And I was curious if it was then, and she knew about it when I was questioning her at our meeting, why that wasn't brought up.
I mean, it had to have been done on the 21st, it's dated on the 21st.
It was in the packet.
So she had to have had this, no, this letter was sent after our meeting. It was sent by Miss Lindsay White to us on our email. And I'm guessing that you printed this off
Printed it
yourself.
off the computer, yes.
What was in the packet? What was in the
It
packet?
was in the packet.
Everything that's on my table right now was in our packet.
But
this
it's not
letter
a
wasn't
date
in
on
it.
that one.
Oh, what was in the packet said draft. The form was in the
Yeah.
packet said draft.
Right, DRA, FT.
It's no date on that one. The one I had's got a
Okay.
date on it.
All right, well, okay, it was the 21st.
Michael, I'm just curious of why this wasn't brought to the board before they went and gonna spend $1,000 of taxpayers' money when we already got her on the job to do this and the chamber was volunteering to help us. I don't
Okay,
understand that.
no,
I'm
no.
confused.
Well,
Chamber
no,
did
the
it.
la,
Wait a
the,
minute, wait a minute,
No.
wait a minute.
the
Now,
last,
That's bullshit.
We're getting a little bit out of line here. Let's slow down.
the last part of your statement, no, sir. You brought up at the meeting about the chamber. I called Tina, I think I called Monday and we talked Tuesday. I was not aware that the chamber was interested until you said something at the meeting. Now, other people may have been, but I wasn't. No, I knew nothing about the, Tori and I had conversations on a number of people that might be able to help. And I don't know this lady, I don't know where this lady's name came from or anything. We went through a process to find somebody that could give us some help on the Christmas parade.
And that was discussed
Here's the
at
deal.
at your meeting on, what, the last meeting?
14th, I think.
Yes, and that was discussed, and names were brought up, and you wrote down the names, and you said you'll get with them.
Yes, sir. I mean,
And
I took advice from
On
the board.
Saturday,
Took
they
advice
showed
from the
up
Park
and
and
we
Rec
talked.
Advisory Board, explored those options, consulted with Jay on how to pursue those options, and this is where we ended up.
Are those meetings recorded?
Parks and Rec Board? I don't know, I doubt it, I don't know.
It's supposed to be, all
keeps the
meetings are
minutes?
supposed to be recorded.
We weren't able to get in here that night.
No, we could not.
Was
They
you
are
here?
audio recorded.
Yeah, I
Who
was
come
here.
up with that?
They are auto-recorded.
Honestly, I can't remember because we were stuck on football and soccer forever. I might have left the room during that.
Ms. Torres,
conversation. I
did
don't
you just say you had an audio recording of it? Okay, Mr. Craig, she has a recording.
Ken's wanted to ask.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. But here's my deal, here is an executed contract. Right here, both parties. Would you explain to everybody who has to approve a contract before it's executed?
Well, the board approved it.
All contracts.
That's why it's on the agenda. The
This
agenda-
was executed on the 21st of October. We had a meeting that night. And on planning of the Christmas parade. It was executed on that day, and I'm gonna bet it wasn't after our meeting.
No, it probably wasn't, no, I'm not gonna say that.
And so what I'm saying is we're executing contracts without the board's approval.
No, well, it's on the board's agenda tonight. We had
Mr.
not-
Minor.
We had not moved forward at all on anything related to this.
I have a question for the attorney. If a contract is signed by both parties, is it considered executed? Yes. Yes, it is. We have got to quit executing contracts without this board's approval. I'd really like to enter executive session right now. If I'll make a motion, we enter executive
second.
session.
Have a motion from the vice mayor, second from Mr. Cates, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We will adjourn to executive session. Okay, we'll bring the meeting back into session.
Broke my teeth out Friday night eating candy.
Mr. Jay, we need to show the no action is affecting you.
We got the one tap.
Okay. Okay. All right. Mr. Jay, turn the meeting over to you.
Mayor, council, or alderman, TDOT is in the process of getting a number of contracts out to cities and counties, before October 31st deadline. I received a letter dated last Friday, October 22nd, after your agenda was published. It is the contract that we've been working on for a year for the grant for the Opticom preemption signal system on the three intersections in the city. This is a 100% grant. Trying to find the total amount. Page is not total, it's $192,000 approximately. This is the small cities block grant, that the city receives. And because of the deadline, I would ask authorization for the mayor to execute the agreement so we can submit it tomorrow.
And I have reviewed it, and I can approve it as to form.
I make a motion that we approve, give, Mr. Johnson, authority to approve that contract.
Yeah, this is kind of an emergency, right?
It is because of the deadline, it can't wait till your November regular meeting, no, sir.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion from the vice mayor. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second from Mr. Hahn. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Cates?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Well, you been in the seat how long now? Yep. This one. See how-
How you doing, young lady?
Oh, yeah.
You may hear a little cussing on that thing tonight. I was not happy.
Wow.
See, sir.
Take care, Ron.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Why would I get flowers?
I'll be by tomorrow.
Huh?
You got three?
They're not mine. No, they're gonna stay up here till Thanksgiving.